What one thing, if it were true, would completely transform your business? I want to talk about this question in today's video. Welcome back to another episode of #winning. Uriel King here, CEO and founder of Healthpreneur. We help health practitioners and coaches build transformational coaching businesses. And one of the biggest challenges you might be facing, like I face, like everyone else faces, is you have so much to do, and not just time being a limitation, but focus being a limitation. So when you have all of these things to do, how do you prioritize what gets more of your energy and attention? And I think this is the fundamental question that us leaders have to really think about seriously. Because as I mentioned before, if you're working really hard and you're not where you want to be, it means you're working on the wrong stuff. You're working on things that are not actually moving you forward towards your dream destination. And that's okay, because you're only doing the best you can with what you've known up until now. But part of what we want to do as leaders of our business and our lives is we always want to be checking in and doing an inventory of what we're doing with our time, right? What am I doing today? What am I doing this week? What am I doing this month? Am I actually moving things forward, or am I just being busy? We often talk about working in the business versus working on the business, right? When you're working in the business, you're not really moving the business forward. You're basically keeping up with the demands of the business. You enroll clients, and then in the business, a lot of times is essentially you're serving those clients. You're probably spending most of your time in client care and patient delivery. It's 8, 10, 12 hours a day of one-on-one, little appointments here and there. Unfortunately, when you're a technician or a practitioner in the business, you're not doing things that are going to dramatically change and transform the business, other than providing an exceptional experience for your clients, which is obviously super important. So this is top of mind for me, because this is something I've been really thinking about. And I look back to some of the objectives that we had set earlier in the year, and this year we've almost doubled the business from last year, and it's still not where we want it to be. It's still not like the projection that I had set at the start of the year. And so I look back at this and I ask myself, okay, well, why is that, right? Or if I set a goal for this month or last month and we don't hit it, and this is very valuable for you as well, is you set goals and you look back and you ask yourself, why did I not hit the goal? And usually, if you're being very honest, and at least you have if you have a bit of, I guess, guidance around what to look at in terms of blind spots, this is hopefully what these videos are for, to a certain extent, is to recognize, okay, if I set this goal and I'm not there, what did I not do that was required in order to get us there? So in a coaching business, where you are speaking to people on the phone or on Zoom to enroll them, the single most important thing that is going to determine the growth of your business is the number of calls you get booked on your calendar, period. It doesn't even matter what your no-show rate is, your close rate. I mean, obviously those factor in, but when you look at what is the most important leading indicator of the growth of my business, it's the number of calls booked. If you look at your daily calendar and you have no calls on your calendar, it's impossible for you to achieve the growth that you want to achieve. And so if that's the case, then you have to take a step back from that and ask, okay, well, if that's what's going to drive the business, what's the one thing, if it were true, so if that's the one thing that would completely transform my business, that question I talked about earlier, what would need to be true in order to make that happen? What would need to be true in order for me to book my calendar full of calls, whether it's 4 or 5 a day, whatever it is that you're after? And you keep asking that question and you just keep digging. All right, so what do I have to do in order to fill my calendar with 4 or 5 calls booked a day, if you're the only person in the business doing sales calls? And then you look at the levers that are making that possible. And for a lot of businesses, unfortunately, it's simply not something they control. Well, I guess I'll post more. Okay, well, there's no direct correlation between how much you post and people booking calls. There is a correlation between the number of offers you make and the amount of money you make. But again, if you make too many offers, if you're always making asks, you're going to burn out your list. You're going to burn out your audience. So you become like stuck in a bit of a predicament where you have no control over the growth of your business to a certain extent based on how early stage you might be. If you're someone who's just starting out or you don't have much traction, it's like you're just throwing a bunch of stuff up against the wall. But if you are running, for instance, a perfect client pipeline, if you're running ads, then it's simply a matter of, okay, well, now I have some degree of control over my growth, because I know if I spend $100 a day, versus $500 a day, I will theoretically get 5 times more leads at the higher ad spend. If I get more leads and everything else through the funnel is the same, theoretically, I should be able to get 5 times more calls booked. And theoretically, if my close rate and show rate stay the same, I should be able to enroll 5 times more clients. And so that's a lever that becomes very exciting to be able to pull because now it's controllable. Now, obviously, everything doesn't stay exactly the same as you scale, but roughly it's close enough. So for me, recently we let go of our director of marketing, and there was a lull as he was onboarding where I kind of took my foot off the gas pedal for a second. And I started, and as I'm looking back through the metrics, I'm like, oh, interesting how we just kind of like paused some of our initiatives for a second to make sure this individual is up and running. And during this process, I thought to myself, okay, so now I'm back in the seat. What do I have to do? Like, what's the one thing that I have a lot of things I'm doing, right? I'm coaching clients, I'm leading the team, I'm working closely with our sales reps. I'm always looking to improve the products, but I can't do everything. I can't do everything at the same time. So I said to myself, at this moment in time, in this season of our business, and when I say season, that might be a month, it might be a couple months. The only thing that matters for me in the growth of this business right now is getting our target of calls booked per day met, period, end of story. So what does that mean? I have to take energy away from other areas that I know are important, but are not the most important right now. Because another way of looking at this is, again, the question is like, what one thing, if it were true, would transform my business? Okay, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at this question is, what one thing, if it stopped happening, would it lead to my business's demise? So in my case, I'm like, if we don't book calls, the business will go out of business. Now, obviously, we have hundreds of clients on the back end, so that wouldn't happen because we have retention, renewals, all that kind of stuff. But I'm trying to make this worst case scenario. If we do not hit a certain number of calls booked per day, that becomes a very big problem. I'm gonna have to let salespeople go. We're gonna have to drop our revenue. I'm not okay with that. So I'm always trying to sell myself on, if I have all these different priorities, if you have a lot of priorities, you have none, right? I've got all these things I could be doing. I can't do all of them now. If I have to choose one, which one is the most important? And this is essentially what strategy is. Strategy is prioritization. It's saying no to everything other than the one thing that's the most important. Again, as the leader of your business, a big piece of this is resource allocation. So where are you going to put your money? Where are you going to put your time and energy? Because if you put it in the wrong places, like I'm going to build a fancy website. If you do that, I promise you that is one of the single worst decisions you can ever make. Oh, I'm going to spend more of my time in Canva designing pretty graphics. That is one of the worst things you can possibly do with your time. And that's the difference between those who motor along, struggle along, mosey along at whatever slow pace, and others who are like, the most important thing I can do is talk to potential clients, enroll them in my program, boom. And they hit the ground running, they DM people, they get on the phone, they get on Zoom, they knock on doors. They're proactively putting themselves out there in really hard situations that most people are looking to avoid. And so it's identifying what's the most important thing to do. Now, if you don't know what the most important thing to do is, that's a very big problem. That's the most important and the only problem you have. And if you don't know what you don't know, that's your biggest danger. And this is why it's so imperative to work with a coach, like someone who's actually been there and done that, and someone who knows what they're doing. Because if you don't work with, again, this is what we provide our clients with. Like, hey, I want to get here. What am I not doing? Oh, it's really simple. You're missing this. Just do this. That's it. So as an example, when our clients launch their pipeline, there's a couple things to do throughout the week, but the most important skill they must develop and master to catapult their business is their selling skills. Period. End of story. Because pretty much all of our clients' pipelines work well, right? There's always little exceptions here and there, and the offer and the messaging are a bit off, and we have to tweak that with them. But once you have clients or prospects coming, like leads coming in, prospects booking calls in your calendar, if you can't enroll those people, nothing is going to work, right? So the whole marketing machine could be working, but if you can't enroll a client, nothing's going to make sense. And you have to turn off your ads. You have to go back to ground zero. Nothing's going to work. But if you have that going, if your close rate is good, if you're enrolling 30% of people you speak with, and you have a high ticket offer and your return on ad spend is amazing, then you have another, like, what's the next thing? What's the next most important thing to focus on? And a lot of times what I've noticed that most people don't know what that thing is. And that's totally cool. That's why you have to seek out mentorship. And that's the difference between people who struggle in business and those who move a lot faster. So we often get asked, hey, Yuri, what's the difference between your clients that are doing 50 to 100K per month and me, who's not in your program, who's considering joining you guys? Number one, it's they make fast decisions. They don't take forever to decide things. And two is they understand through our guidance, they get clarity on what to do. That's step number one. Okay, there's a 3-step process to mastering a new skill. Number one is knowing what to do. Two is learning how to do it well. And third is doing it over and over again till you become masterful. So when you're driving a car, you don't know what to do, right? So you have an instructor beside you. They show you how to drive the car properly, right? So it's like, here's how you drive. Then the second thing is, here's how you do it properly, right? Here's how you properly do parallel park, whatever. And then you just practice over and over and over again. That's really the 3-step secret sauce. So if you don't have any guidance on what to do or how to do it properly, you're wasting your time doing things that are ineffective and inefficient and don't produce results. So again, going back to why this is top of mind for me is this past week, all I've been focused on is going back into Adlandia. And when I say that, I'm looking at our ads, and we spend about 350 to 400,000 a month on ads, and we're always profitable in the first 30 days on cash collected, but it's not good enough. Like, it's not good enough for me. It's like I still want way more margin. And so I look at our stuff, and I'm just being honest. I'm like, you're not good enough, man. It's not good enough. Like, I'm not good enough. Our video ads aren't good enough. Our ad copy isn't good enough. Some of our decision making has been lax with respect to some of the campaign management. And I'm just very honest about that. And what that has allowed me to do, and this is something that I've hopefully done a good job at instilling our clients with, is it puts the power back in my hands. I'm no longer at the mercy of external forces, which I don't believe in anyways. So I don't care if it's the elections or the economy or the weather. I don't give a shit. I don't care if it's Thanksgiving or Christmas Day. There are always people out there who are ready to buy. And the reason they're not buying from us is because our stuff is shit. It's not good enough. Okay, cool. So how do we fix the shit? We go back to the fundamentals. We go back to basics. So like even this morning, I got up at 2:30 a.m. and 3 a.m. until 6:30 in the morning, all I did for 3.5 hours was I was working with our copywriter who's on the other side of the world. And we were just going back and forth and we're destroying our ad copy. We're destroying the messaging. Like, this is shit. This hook is not compelling enough. Let's try this. We're scrutinizing it. We're running it through Hemingway app. Is it too complicated? How do we, bring it down? And we're just like every single sentence and every single word, I'm like, it's got to be better. It's got to be better. Okay, it's clear. How do we make it more compelling? And to be honest, it's a very laborious process. But the reality is, if you want to become exceptional, like, these are the things that you have to do. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that from ground zero, because from 0 to 1, you can just generally get some stuff out there and it'll do very well. But when you're like at 1 and you want to get to 10, just metaphorically speaking, or 1 to 1.1, 1.5, it requires a lot more work, just like a sprinter, right? If you're not a sprinter, the amount of work that you have to put in to go from like a 14-second 100 meter to a 12-second 100, like, you could shave off 2 seconds in your 100-meter sprint just by learning proper running technique. That's it. But to go from like a 10-second 100 meter to a 9.9 requires so much more work. The law of diminishing return kicks in the further along you go. So when, in our case, we've run thousands of ads over the past 7 years, we can't just like put stuff out there anymore. We have to be a lot more scrutinizing. The market is so much more competitive. There's a lot more skepticism. We can't just, I was looking at some of our ads, I actually relaunched some of our old ads and they just completely flopped, right? Our cost per lead and cost per call books a couple years ago was like a fraction. We launched it again now, it's like, holy shit. When I look at some of the ads that we were running before COVID, we did hundreds of shares. It was crazy. Now, like nothing. And that's because the market's changed. And if the market's changed and it's become a bit more sophisticated, we have to get better. So when I look at, okay, Yuri, for me, right now in this moment of our business, and this is obviously gonna be different for you perhaps, the most important thing for me to focus on is getting our ads cranking at a much higher level. So we're bringing more volume through our pipeline. And if everything else stays the same, we get more calls booked. And if I did nothing else in the business, because again, I've got an amazing team that supports our clients and all this other stuff. I don't just dismiss all the other stuff, but the vast majority of my focus is just on this. Cause I'm like, I know if I can improve this, if I can really move this needle, then this will start to take off. And I can step away from that temporarily, have our team around that support it and keep the process going. And then I can move into the next stage or the next area of business that needs my focus at that moment. And this is when I look at, if I'm looking at our P&L over the year, right? So month over month over month, and I'm looking at stagnant growth or very limited growth, basically, and if you look at yours as well, what this tells you is if you're here and you're here and you're here and you're the same, or it's just going a little bit higher, but not crazy, it's you haven't solved the main constraints. You haven't identified the main problem or the main bottleneck in your business and attacked it with everything. Another way of looking at this, in the summertime, we had a leak in our house. So one of the pipes that went from our kitchen down to the basement had a leak, and there was water dripping down the wall in the basement. And we're like, fuck, water damage, not fun. So our contractor comes, they rip the whole wall down. Okay, like all the drywall, everything's bare, they take out the insulation, and there's pipes, there's a couple pipes. And so they fix where they think the leak is coming from, but the leak, it wasn't super obvious. So they made the fix, we let it just sit there for a day or two to see if that was the actual source of the problem before, patching up the wall again. Lo and behold, the next day, there's more water dripping. Like shit. So we didn't solve, or they didn't solve, the main constraints. So it would be like that, water continuing to drip while we're doing other stuff in the house. We're going out and looking for patio furniture or painting the walls, when none of that stuff matters if this leak doesn't get fixed. Because if this leak doesn't get fixed, it's going to become a really bad situation. So with your business, you want to think about, where is the leak in your business? There's always a leak. There's always at least one, there's probably a couple, but there's always one that needs to be fixed first and foremost. It may not mean you're going to go to business tomorrow, but if it doesn't get addressed, at best, you'll maintain. At worst, it's going to go down and you're going to be in big trouble. So my intention with this video is to remind you of two things. One is to do your very best at being able to correlate the most important activity with what is going to be needed to grow your business, right? So again, what one thing, if it were true, would transform my business? What one thing, if it were not happening, would make me go out of business? You keep asking that question, you'll attack most likely the real problem. Two is, if you're not sure what the real problem is or what that water leak might be, you have to get coaching. Because if you don't, it's not the cost of the coaching program or the mentorship that's going to hurt you. It's the cost of staying where you are and literally turning your house into a flooded basement. Because once that happens, trying to turn it all around is very, very hard. And I share this with you because I see so many people make this fatal mistake. They look at the cost of investing in whatever it is, and they're like, oh, it depends on the cost. That's too expensive. But here's the thing, is you need to recognize that the cost of your current situation is catastrophic if it doesn't get fixed. And if you think it's okay, I'm telling you it's not. And I want you to remember this. Just because you're growing your business for free, organically posting content, and you think that's not costing you anything, it is costing you the most. It's costing you the most because it's going to take you forever. You're creating content and posting stuff, and it takes forever for you to get feedback from that. Therefore, you could be going down the exact wrong path, and it could take you 5, 7, even 10 years before you get feedback from the marketplace saying, I don't care what you're doing. I don't care about what you're offering. And therefore, your business doesn't grow and your bank account reflects that. The reason I love advertising is it doesn't take you 10 years to get that feedback. It takes you a day, 2 days. And so when people look at this of like, well, it's like, how much do I have to budget for the ads? Fucking who cares? Put it on a credit card and get immediate feedback from the market so you understand whether you have product market fit. Because if you don't understand if you have product market fit, you will spend years without knowing that. And the easiest way to know is to look at your bank account. If your bank account is not where you want it to be, if you don't have clients tripping over themselves trying to work with you, you have issues that need to be fixed. And if you don't address those and you're thinking, oh, I can't invest in a coach, I can't, like, that is the least of your concerns. You have to understand that the cost of inaction is the most expensive thing you're currently paying. It is the biggest tax in your business. Don't worry about moving to Puerto Rico to save on tax. Fix your current situation. Invest in solving the problems that you're currently dealing with that you're likely not even aware of. Because if you're not aware of them, that's the biggest danger. Today, I want to talk with you about how to overcome fear and self-doubt as an online health coach or an online practitioner growing your coaching business.